And working alongside Rajmi Eka with Agribusiness Associates Incorporated, we co-authored the Food Loss and Waste Value Chain Selection Guide, 2nd edition and Toolkit. This project was initially funded by the U.S. Agency for International Development with technical support from the United States Department of Agriculture. You can access this guide and its toolkit on Climate Links, a USAID repository website. And I'll show you a little bit of it, and I've opened up individual tabs for ease of showing you, but these tools are in a variety of PDFs, Excels, and PowerPoints. So when you first go to the website, you can download the guide here, as well as the entire toolkit list. Once you access the guide, you start to get an overview of the projects, but I kind of want to delve straight into the process and how to best use this guide. So this is a 5-step process. The first stage is planning. The second stage is framing a food loss waste objective. The third is identifying and prioritizing value chains. The fourth stage is data collection, and the fifth is validating food loss and waste value chain selection. Within the guide, each stage has its own section, and all of the resources have been numbered as per the stage. So when you first start off, when preparing for this exercise, we have provided you 4 tools. The first one is an overview presentation, and this presentation gives a brief background on why we're doing this and what we mean by food loss and waste. Gives an overview a little bit deeper of those 5 stages and what will be asked or required at each of them for an organization. And then it starts to introduce some of the planning tools that we have to help get this process started and identifying who is the core team who will be participating at different stages throughout this process. One of the more adaptive areas is the data collection. This is highly dependent on your organization's resources, whether that's financial, how much time you have for your staff. And so creating kind of schedules and starting to get things on the calendar, as well as providing some guidance, some homework on next steps and where to get going. So we start there as this 1A. 1B1 and 1B2 are kind of one and the same. So the first one we did is a PowerPoint presentation that goes through a background of food loss and waste. And the importance of this is so that as you go through this process, different people may engage at different times, but this helps to get everybody on the same page so that when we talk about food loss and waste, we're all kind of using the same lenses to look at it from. This has been done either by a PowerPoint you can use that has built-in audio. It has also been uploaded to YouTube as a video. So it takes about 25 minutes to go through it, but also has some cross-checks to make sure everybody's understanding the content. And then the third is the planning tool, 1C. When you first go into the planning tool, it gives you an overview of who you may want to include, different types of actors. And the first tab is participants. Who is your core team? Usually about 3 people who will really lead this process throughout the entire journey. And then you may engage external consultants, additional project staff at different parts. This is also a great opportunity to include them in the prioritizing value chain stage. And then external stakeholders. You'll definitely want those for the validation workshop. And we've created an additional list down here to just focus on who you want to help validate the results at the end of the day. Another tab is data collection. As noted before, there's a lot of flexibility in here, and all of these orange cells can be completed, and then there are formulas in these gray cells. So this is what we've noticed in a publishable paper before. This is the scale required for publishing, but this is just an exercise to get a good idea of what's going on and fill in some data gaps, primarily qualitative. So when going through here, you may estimate how many hours you think it'll take based on your previous experience. And this kind of gives you an idea of how much time is it going to take for value chains, how much is it going to cost, and may give you a better idea of how many you'll be able to look into and research. And then the final is the schedule. When we piloted this, we had 2 weeks in which to pilot it, which was very short. So if you can take a few months, that would be great, and spread these activities out. There are some estimates for how long things can last, but this again helps you to start getting things on paper and making sure everybody's schedules are aligned with the work that needs to happen. The next in this stage, after we get through stage 1, and the YouTube link is found here, it also breaks down what needs to happen in preparation, and this is for the facilitator. So going through a few key food loss waste resources so you have a better understanding of what needs to happen, and doing some preparation. The toolkit is there for guidance. We welcome you to make any changes in the PowerPoints and in the surveys to really fit your organization and their needs and their skill level. And so we've provided you this outline that you can then start to go through and make specific for who you're doing. There's also the facilitation session and then some homework people can be assigned to prepare for the next stage and wrap this one up. The second stage is framing a food loss waste objective. This gives a little bit of an overview of that more specifically. This takes about half a day to a day and is probably one of the most intuitive. It only has 2A, and the presentation does a great job of really walking you through. It gives a recap of the food loss and waste background to ensure everybody has kind of the shared understanding still. And then you start to really dig into who are we as an organization, and then what are our priorities, what are our strengths. And from here you can go through and you can fill information right into the presentation, and they really help you to then frame these with the food loss and waste lens that you've brought into the session. And so for a lot of organizations working in agriculture, we focus on yields, which is how do we increase, the amount that's available. The other head of that coin is reducing losses so that more of that makes it to the end consumer. And in certain instances, there's a good chance you're already doing some food loss and waste reduction work. It's just the framing that we're using to do that in. And then after you kind of identified your organization's strengths and priorities and how that aligns with food loss and waste, you get to pick your prioritization criteria and what's important for you. As you see in green, the food loss indicator and food waste indicator, these are both necessary for this entire work. A lot of these other priority criteria will use this information to calculate the scale of this aspect. So in addition to this, you can really choose any of these, and you can also make your own, or you can pull from other areas such as sustainable development goals, whatever works best for your organization, because your food loss waste interventions are going to be much more effective if they already incorporate what you're doing. And so we'll go through this prioritization, and at the end, you will have developed a food loss waste criteria, having a little bit of an idea of what that looks like, as well as kind of doing some brainstorming as to what type of interventions you may be using in your work. So that's the second one. Now going into, and then here is one of the cool things that we have is you have these guiding questions and suggested indicators. So as you pick your criteria, you can also read through these pages for the ones that we've already provided to get a bit of an idea of what it means and how it can be assessed. At this stage, you're just kind of picking these and understanding how they're more aligned to your organization. Going on to stage 3, we start to identify and prioritize these value chains. Looking at the toolkit, there is primarily one. There is the prioritization matrix. And so as you see, we've given a key here that cells in orange should be filled out. Cells that are blue will be automatically filled from other cells, and then those in gray have formulas embedded in them and kind of reveal some results. So the first list are these promising value chains. And again, this is a very flexible toolkit. So let's say you're preparing for this and you know you're interested in 5 value chains at the very beginning. You can go ahead and outline 5 value chains. Some organizations may want to identify their criteria first and then do a big brainstorming session later. It's all very flexible and adaptable, but what you'll do on here is you'll start and you'll type in each of your value chains, whether that's milk on one, cheese, corn, however you choose to do it, and you start to gather some basic information. And this tells us what's the scale of this and it's important to the national economy. And so we start to get a feel for some basic information we can then incorporate later. On this next scale, we have the prioritization criteria where you get to choose your criteria here. And it's really helpful, especially if you're a large organization or this happens over multiple years or different people will engage at different times, to tell us why did you select this criteria. Because while many of you may be embedded in your organizations and it may be very clear, it might help for new people that can reference this and say, oh, we selected this because it's aligned with our mission and values, or this was a priority of our government in this year. And then defining it as well. So economic outcomes can mean many different things to different people depending on your perspective. And so just a little bit about we selected it for this reason, and this is what it means to us. Optional at this time and can also be done during some other sessions is you give each of these a weight added up to 100%. So not all indicators have the same priority. You can adjust that. And now you start to fill in the indicator. Here we've pasted from that guide that we just showed you a moment ago of some suggested indicators. So feel free to use these or make up your own. And here's some sources of data you can use to pull information. Food loss and waste is really important to addressing many issues, but there is a lack of information on the whole. And there are some repositories that are coming up, like the FAO's Food Loss and Waste Database and AFLIS, Africa's Post-Harvest Loss Information System. But a lot of times these systems are only as strong as the information that's been put into them. And so there's still a lot of work and understanding to be done in this area. After you do your indicator, you get to decide how you're going to measure it. So this can be your formula. So if your economic could be the price of food loss and waste per kg, so that's kind of what's the cost per kg. You could multiply that by the total quantity lost to get an idea. Some of these topics may get relatively qualitative. They might not have direct numbers, so you can maybe go in and create some sort of scale or index. Let's say if you give them a topic at 10%, you can say from 1 to 10, a 1 means this, a 2 means this, and then a 10 means this. And so you can start to use qualitative indicator. 1 means this is rarely an issue, 10, this is a significant issue for the local economy. And then also briefly explain how value chains have received their scores, especially if there's a great difference between them. Now, from this value chain, these value chains will automatically populate here, where these blue column is, and then these criteria, weightage, and indicators will all auto-populate here. So you've already created the nice matrix. Here's percentage of food loss and waste. We highly encourage you to go through some secondhand research to begin with and say, what do we know about food loss and waste in our area for these topics? One of the things we found very helpful in Kenya was to then highlight this data. If it's a green, that means it was relatively recently. This is specific to our area. We feel very confident in this data. If it's red, could be this research was done 10 years ago on a different continent. It's the best number we could find, but we know it's not very reflective of us. And sometimes you might have to leave it blank because, for example, with our search when we tried to do herbs, such as thyme and basil, there really isn't a lot of food loss waste work at that time in those areas. So we just had some areas where we just didn't know. And then what you go through is once you have your criteria with your indicator and its weightage, your weightage again can be up to 30%, however much it is. For example, we'll say 10%. So you give it a score from 1 to 10 for each of these value chains. And as you see, this automatically populates over here. So 7, 10, however it goes for your selected value chains, and you get an automatic ranking over here. Don't really pay much attention to this until you've gotten to go through this entire exercise. And then this is criteria-specific data, and this starts to get into a lot more of that qualitative information from the guiding questions that we saw earlier. And so this has kind of pulled them over, and this gives you a chance to answer these for different value chains. And so some of this is how perishable is it? What are the days, how many days is it shelf stable? How long can we expect it to go good? We can use high, medium, low. A lot of these help us to kind of hone in on how much loss we may expect from a value chain when we may not have specific or concrete data. This last one is feasibility criteria. Both of the times we piloted it, this was very high on the tops of our list, but it's a really good list to go through once you're kind of honing in on which ones you're interested, is just saying, is there market demand for this? Is it smallholder friendly if that's your target audience? What's our existing knowledge? Is it easy to access? So when we were in Costa Rica, not all value chains were easy to get a hold of if they were contract farmers. So that influenced how the local government decided to select which value chains to dig into. And then for the last one, this is a bit for your organizational records if you're interested, but you can go through and say at the different stages who was involved in helping to develop the prioritization matrix. Depending on how you want to keep records, this kind of helps keep everything in one swoop, and then you can always go back to different participants or individuals if you want to follow up with that type of content. But again, all of these tools are here for your use. They're here to be helpful, and not all aspects may serve you well, or you may already have your own internal systems that work better. So that's 3. I know it's all in one cell, and so that one tool makes it look like it's all contained, but it does get quite in-depth and takes a couple of days to fill out. Moving on to stage 4 is data collection. Again, the goal of this guide is to help you select which value chains to dig into. And no matter how you do this, you're going to need to use this opportunity to then use some of these research methods and get a baseline for your data. But on the outset, it can give you a really good understanding of qualitative observations as to what food loss and waste looks like. So we have a majority of the tools are here, but they're all relatively simple. So let's just hop in and take a look at them. So when we go into 4A, this is an overview of the data collection in general. Here are the 4 items that showed up in the planning tool before in 1C, and we'll go through a little bit more of what this looks like for each of them. We've provided examples of what this looks like in different areas. So the 4 main things we have are field observations, which you then capture and share through photo stories. Load tracking, where you do some measurements to start to get a little bit more understanding of the quantity of losses and also where quality losses are occurring, where you're not completely losing the product, but it's starting to decrease in value rapidly. Value focus group discussions are a great tool to understand the value chain map and how products are flowing. And then we have a series of semi-structured interviews where you can talk to different people and get an idea of what food loss and waste looks like for them. So here's a brief example of a photo story of what palm nuts for palm oil in Cameroon on the farm looks like. And these are really helpful, especially for the validation workshop and sharing with others what the process looks like and where losses occur. Another tool we found helpful is taking like a value chain map of specific activities and understanding how much loss or waste occurs at each stage. And these help you to understand where are losses occurring, how much are they occurring, and where should we be focusing our efforts at. Here's one example of a value chain map to understand the flow of product in the system. For example, this is how Kenya chose to display some of their tomato findings from their project. And then we have semi-structured interviews, as well as data management tools to help collect that data for your ease of use. Additional secondary data you can do is some desk research, getting a nice overview or an outline of what you know about the product. Export, if this is a product that you're focusing on for export, here's some information you may want to collect as well. Depending on your product, you may want to have a seasonality calendar of when things are happening, what different activities, when products come online. In most of our research, we see rain-fed agriculture often means there's a lot of product coming onto the market all at once. And so sometimes it helps to capture that in these visuals to better be able to manage it. And we've given you a blank one here to work with. And so this kind of gives you this. So what this is doing is giving a nice overview of what all exists. And then as we dive in, we can come to the food loss management tool. It's given a bit of an overview of each of the tabs that's available here and gives some direction. The first one is just a value chain overview. This is the same that we saw in the prioritization matrix where you started to get basic information. You can copy and paste that over here. Again, another blank seasonal calendar, the post-harvest life cycle. And it really helps for this research if you have somebody who already has a level of expertise in doing some sort of food loss and waste research or post-harvest research. Those skills can be very helpful. This helps to get with quality assessments where you can just pick up, we often estimated about 20 products, so you pick up 20 papayas and randomly assess them for different qualities or damage. Focus group discussion, those can be written out on paper, but this is helpful for writing down some of those notes and capturing them here for others to use later. And then we have some of the responses from the surveys that can be done here. This one is a semi-structured survey for the producer. So this is when you go to the farmer and you get a better understanding of their crop and really taking it from the point of harvest until the point that it leaves their hands and understand what's going on at that time. You get a general description of it. And then for each of these topics, you start to see how is harvest done? How long does it take? How many containers do you use? Equipment or machinery? How many people does it take to harvest per hectare? Who is involved? Is this women? Are these migrants? Are these other local groups? And what are their approximate salaries? This is really flexible based on your prioritization criteria. So this is when it's really helpful to go back into the guide, and we'll go back up here to this prioritization criteria. And so these are a lot of these guiding questions. And so when you choose, for example, food, nutrition, security, review some of these key questions and then decide which of those may be more helpful to include in these surveys based on what you're of most interest to. So this one is for farmers, producers, and then there's a very comparable one for pack houses. So you can use this for pack houses or processing plants, and they kind of just give you the outline for how to produce this information, how to capture it. But again, everything's flexible. I would like to take this moment to thank Laura Brenes Peralta. She was our consultant in Costa Rica. We had a handful of tools we were using for really in-depth research that needed to be simplified, and so she did a great job in helping to develop these tools in Spanish, and then we have translated them back into English. So thank you, Laura. We also have the farm field data collection tool. So this is where you go through and you can pick up samples, pick up 20 individual pieces if you want, and then you grade them on quality, grades 1, 2, and 3. If they have any issues such as pathological, mechanical, how much needs to be discarded, any remarks, we always encourage taking photos. This is so helpful in reports and in the validation workshop. And then for each of those quality categories, you can explain what those look like here. Again, this helps it for different people to pick up the research and understand. But for example, you may be working with a tomato expert, but you're comparing across value chains. So you also want livestock people to be able to have a good understanding of this as well. So this is for the farm, and this is for the plant or pack house. These follow the exact same outline. It's just a bit of a different sheet, so depending on who you're working with. And to capture the waste data, we also have surveys that go to market vendors to understand waste. A lot of the surveys, we've left you 4 areas for 4 different value chains. We assume, for example, if you choose to include up to 10 value chains in the prioritization matrix, maybe you only choose the top 2 or 3 or 4 to look at. So you can feel free to add or delete as many columns based on which products you are looking at and collecting data for. And so we can fill this out, and this understands from the vendor's perspective, how much are they taking in, how much are they having to throw away, where does that loss occur, and why. And then we also do a similar with consumers. So it's really fun even just to go to the market and talk to consumers there that are willing to do the survey of understanding, are they the main food preparer? How many people are they preparing for, women and children, so you understand the quantity there. And then again, how often do you buy this product? Do you consume it or not? Some items are more perishable than others, like fresh greens and spinach compared to, I say compared to a mango. People like mango, so it's really hard for those to go bad without being consumed. So then you have these, and then all of this information, we've created this Excel format, which line up exactly with those sheets, so you can type in your data here and hopefully get you on the route to being able to do some analysis and some quick tables to get you that information. So now that we've gone through the data collection and done some analysis and put that content together, we're ready for stage 5, the validation selection. So here we have 3 different tools. The first one being the validation workshop presentation. And so again, this is just an outline that we use to give you a tool, but you're more than welcome to use your organization's own website or your own approach. Usually in these, we like to start out with the question to the audience of, if you only have so much money, for example, $100 to invest in reducing food loss and waste, where is it that you make that investment? Which is a key goal of this tool, is to understand where are we going to get the biggest bang for our buck. And so a little bit of background on food loss and waste, especially if those individuals weren't previously a part of any of the sessions or you're starting to engage additional stakeholders. This game was really fun. It was very popular in Kenya, where we kind of distinguished, does this count as food loss? Does this count as food waste? Or is this neither? Really kind of making sure everybody has a clear understanding of this and engaging the audience. going through a bit of the process. And then again, all of these are editable, but letting people know, like, these are the value chains we initially selected and how we scored them. These are the criteria that we chose to select, as well as their indicators. And then the photo story, walking individuals through the process that was observed, and the map that came out, including loss numbers. And these are really great because it gives an opportunity for the audience members to validate those numbers and say if they agree with them or not. And again, it's really important to define who your audience is. So in Kenya, we worked with larger farmers, not smallholder farmers. So acknowledging those caveats that these numbers will look different there. And then from the food waste findings, here's some different ways to analyze and present the table to see which foods are being lost and how, and considerations. In addition to that, we also have the Collaborating, Learning, and Adapting event, which is another PowerPoint drilling heavily on USAID's CLA process. And again, much like the initial framing a food loss waste objective presentation, each of the slides can be worked in directly. So it has guiding questions and you can answer those shortly. And then we also have a outline for a final report that can hopefully be used to capture all the key data and share as appropriate. So we also, within the guide, have some references if you'd like to acknowledge those, and an index. We've created this in English as well as Spanish. So we have both of those options available. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for hanging out with me as I walked us through most of this toolkit. And if you guys have any questions, we would love to also hear how you've used the tool, or if we can give you some guidance on best practices. So feel free to reach out to Rajmi or myself. Thank you all and have a great day.